Alright, folks, we're back here. This is part 5, the final part for today for Tuesday, December 10th, 2013. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.net. On YouTube, my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. And I'm going to cover Africa in this last video, of a continent that I know absolutely nothing about. So, it's I'm going to go ahead and cover it anyways, though, right? Because then I'll be accused of, why don't you cover Africa? France begins to disarm Central African Republic militias. This is what's going on as far as Africa right now. It was Mali. They had troops there along with the UN, and now they're in the Central African Republic. They started to remove weapons from fighters there, and I'm going to go down here. There was a 1,600-strong French force that has been sent to the Central African Republic, deployed after days of communal fighting, claimed 400 lives. They've been in turmoil since March, when an alliance of rebels known as Saliki seized power. The alliance has since then been disbanded, and the rebel leader is now president. France says that the fighters loyal to the interim president had to return to the barracks, and the rest would have to surrender their weapons. Okay, so moving on here, license to kill for French military overseas operations, or OPEX. The new military program law studied in November reinforces impunity for French soldiers engaged in overseas operations. Several articles aim to prevent unnecessary litigation of military operations, responding to a pressing demand of French officers for several years. It's to strengthen the excuse for criminal use of force introduced in 2005. Much of them basically is used for soldiers overseas and crowd control, coercion, military maneuvers. It says today there is no formal declaration of war. The soldiers were allowed to open fire in self-defense, in theory, and only in theory, of course. Since the reform of the General Staff of Military, they can make use of their weapons, including against civilians, since this action is deemed useful for the accomplishment of their mission and consistent with international law. So Mr. Holland of France is going to be heading there after they've had some initial casualties. France vowed Tuesday to finish this job in the Central African Republic after the death of 2 elite soldiers highlighted the risk of a mission to disarm rogue rebels who have plunged the country into chaos. The troops are there to support an African contingent that is due to grow from 2,500 men, but so far it's been the French who have been at the sharp end of the operation. Obama calls for peace. I don't know what's up with this article, but this is how it comes out. Obama calls for peace as Hagel orders U.S. support in Central African Republican mission. And part of that is U.S. military to fly African Union troops to Central Africa. They're going to help fly these AU peacekeeping troops to Car or Caire as part of a French-led effort to restore security there. Hagel's decision comes amid warnings that the historically unstable country could be on the verge of genocide. Obama addressed his remarks to the proud citizens of the Central African Republic and said they have the power to choose a different path with the aid of the biggest empire in the world, along with the EU and that in France, than the violence that led to more than 400 deaths and 2 days of violence last week between Christians and Muslims. Actually, from what I was hearing in different reports, it's actually Muslims slaughtering Christians is what it's happening. Obama says he joins Muslim and Christian leaders in calling for calm and peace. It says those who are committing the crimes should be arrested. These are the same guys that chop people's heads off for being Christian. Africans closer to forming intervention force. So they reached an agreement on a proposal to create an African rapid reaction force to intervene in conflicts. France will provide much of this stuff, and they will seek to persuade its European Union partners to help with financing. They would train 20,000 African troops a year for 5 years by 2015. So I've been covering this about Africa. I really hit it hard about a month ago. And so here we are, right? Mali down to Central African Republic. Nigeria is saying that an African rapid reaction force could tackle Boko Haram, so they're on board. UN and French forces are in a large-scale operation in Mali. And this is from October. This is almost early November when I was talking about UN and French forces and large-scale operation in Mali. It was aimed at preventing a resurgence of terrorist movements, as they called it. French army kills 19 extremists in Mali, and this was, I'll go down here, I think it was from today. Yeah, it's from today. And they killed 19 extremist militants during an army operation. French military was underway in the north of Timbuktu. They're facing a pretty determined group. The French troops haven't reported any deaths or injuries, but this is in Mali, so. A French-led offensive in January drove the extremist groups linked to al-Qaeda out of the cities of northern Mali after they occupied them in the wake of the coup of Bamako last year. Again, remember, northern Mali, Tuareg rebels helped to get rid of these guys, wanted independence. Central government said, F you. Tuareg rebels said, we're going to fight you, and that we don't consider the central government legitimate. But the so-called jihadists have continued to launch periodic strikes on the French, Malian, and African peacekeeping troops. Central African Republic, get ready for it. New wave of refugees thanks to Muslims taking power. So, says they are slaughtering us like chickens, said one Christian refugee over the weekend. Meanwhile, the UN ambassador Samantha Power begs the Muslim leader of the largely Christian country to play nice. So she called the Central African Republic's interim president, Jatodia, on Sunday to express deep concern over the rising tide of violence in the country. It's kind of like Obama's remarks, right? Come on, you guys. No more roughhousing. Can we all just get along? And some kind of background here. It says that Central African Republic, which has basically been in turmoil since a coalition of Muslim fighters led by this Jatodia guy, known as the Salika, overthrew the country's leader in March. He became the interim president following the last one's ouster, making him the first Muslim leader of the mostly Christian country. Reports have described a series of horrors with security forces and militia gangs razing villages, carrying out public killings, and perpetuating widespread rapes. So just looking at the official photos, Samantha Power, Wendo's Muslim leader, Jatodia, doesn't take her seriously. We have deep concern. Still in Central Africa here, Le Monde journalist gets a bit too much of the truth about Muslims from a refugee. This is where French troops are now deployed as yet another country wrecked by basically Muslim extremism in the manner to which we have become accustomed. A Le Monde journalist hears a little too much truth when visiting a refugee camp filled with people driven out by Muslims. Says the words that have been liberated against the background of suffering sometimes send a shiver down your spine. This Lydia, a high-ranking civil servant, reduced to the status of a refugee in her own country, unleashes her anger, and it's all aimed at Muslims, saying that they are not sociable. Even the children bring grenades to the school. They want to exterminate the indigenous people like us. We can't accept living. And with these people who have had a bad mentality, they just need to leave. Around this well-educated woman, several men agree and promise a return match. Then you have this. Christians are being burned alive, beheaded, crucified, tortured to death, and imprisoned in metal shipping containers. That's like I mentioned before. I'm not Christian, but many of the issues that I cover, you may think that I am, and people accuse me of it in the comment board sometimes. But it's about the one-sidedness of it. Being that there's a lot of Christians here in the United States, more than Muslims. But it says, so why is the mainstream media in the U.S. almost totally silent about this phenomenon? When some politician somewhere around the globe inadvertently offends homosexuals or Muslims, it instantly makes headline news, but very few Americans are even aware that it's been estimated that 100 million Christians are currently facing persecution, that approximately 100,000 Christians die for their faith each year. Just some examples here, we'll move on. A Christian taxi driver is pulled out of his cab and beheaded in Egypt, August. Tortured to death by U.S.-backed al-Qaeda rebels in Syria. Slaughtering us like chickens in the Central African Republic. That's what we were just covering, right? Shot for refusing to convert to Islam in Libya. Actually, that's taking place in British prisons, of all places. You're like, what? Yeah, in prisons in Britain, they're actually Christians and non-Muslims are being forced to convert. Head cut off in front of a camera for converting to Christianity in Tunisia. 50 Christians burned to death in their pastor's home in Nigeria. 2 brothers crucified for their faith in Ivory Coast. Angry mob of about 1,000 people destroy a church and beats Christians in India. And Pakistan suicide bombers kill 81 at a church. That happens a lot. Sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia. So, and I'll finish up with this: 80 lashings for drinking communion wine in Iran, which it is the Islamic Republic, but they supposedly allow people to. I always thought that they allowed their people to, practice their religions, Jews or Christianity or whatever. But moving on here, Algerian refugees riot in Bulgarian detention center. We've been led to believe that the majority of the asylum seekers coming from across Turkey and into an overloaded Bulgaria are Syrians. So how the heck did Algerians get there too? The UN yells at Bulgaria for xenophobia, for detaining asylum seekers and for trying to stem the tide of migrants into their country, but why aren't they telling the Turks to stop the hordes at the Turkish border? And that's like how I mentioned in the earlier videos, Turkey's been complicit in creating this refugee crisis. That's another reason why I think they stopped supporting what was going on in Syria. Maybe not completely, but to a certain extent, because they're having to deal with the results, which was possibly the whole point, which is create refugees. So, it's I just think that's what it is. I mean, they're not going to China. They're not going. You don't see masses of Europeans going to Africa, or you don't see these Arabs going to South America. They're going to Europe and North America. And you can say, well, that's because the evil West is doing this. Well, much of the killing is being done by themselves in the name of whatever religious sect they are. Some of it's rebelling against the central governments, a lot like in Africa. Then a lot like Africa, it's both, right? It's got the religious aspect, the political aspect. Then you have other elements like Saudi Arabia that have cash that are funding these. Basically, they're being turned into a proxy army to do, just wreak havoc and destabilize. Whether it's the U.S., whether it's Israel, whether it's the EU or the Gulf states. But these people that do this, they're not going to be living. He's not going to have these people as their neighbors. As far as multiculturalism goes. These people don't want to immerse themselves into the countries that they're moving into. That's just a fact. From all the articles that I've read, at least in the last 6 months to the last year, they self-segregate. There was mainstream media videos that have news reports that have covered this. In France, you have ethnic French that are actually being lynched by non-ethnic French immigrants. The Algerians, it says here, were protesting because they want to be free to roam Bulgaria and perhaps move farther west into Western Europe. Just like those refugees in Norway, these aren't destitute men looking for a roof and a meal. They're criminals. And you have here Norway's insane asylum seekers, so they are right there. Some of the charming-looking, underfed asylum seekers whose blue trays were used as protest signs. Protests for what? A stage of protest against what they considered lousy meals and small portions in the cafeteria. Some hailed from Syria, Sudan, Iran, Morocco, Somalia, and Palestinian territories. The men's complaints didn't sit well with many of the people in the area, who, like other Norwegians, are already less than thrilled with the presence of these centers in their midst. A German woman has been harassed by a Turkish immigrant because she rejected a citizenship application. Just to note, these people that were protesting these meals were actually asylum seekers. They were waiting for their applications to go through. Germany agreed to take 5,000 more Syrians from December 7th. How many will the U.S. welcome? About 2 million Syrian refugees. They actually have a quota. 83% of Britons say there is a population crisis. They believe the treatment of immigrants means Britons lose out. There's actually a UK IP leader on illegal immigration saying to send them back to where they came from. And even though the media keeps calling for more immigrants, anyone who speaks out is immediately demonized as a racist. I've seen Africans in Britain and in U.S. Protesting against more immigration. What's the solution to job losses for middle class? Bring in more immigrants, says the billionaire. Thank you.